Yes, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be going through the process of launching Jenkins server. So to create a Jenkins server, we are going to follow a few steps. Of course, the server is going to come from AWS. So what I'm going to do here is first of all to launch an instance. An instance is the same as a server. You can launch the server anywhere you want. You can do this through virtualization is also another process. You can launch your own server. But in this case, I'm going to use the server from the cloud. And of course, the cloud I'm using is the most famous one, which is AWS. To launch an instance, all I need is to come here and say launch. So now here I'm going to give it a name as Jenkins server. And from here, you have to decide which kind of AMI you are choosing. AMI is another name for Amazon Machine Image. So these are all the images for Amazon. In this case, I'm going to go with Ubuntu. You have to know that Ubuntu usually comes with different kind of a long-term support, LTS. So this long-term support, it means that it was created in year 2022 because Ubuntu usually have a new long-term support every 2 years. So this is going to receive a long-term support of 5 years. So this one will be good until 2027. In 2024, of course, Ubuntu is going to come up with another one, and the process continue like that. So we are going to use Ubuntu 2022. We continue. Then here, of course, we need to choose a bigger one. I can go with the smallest one, which is 1 vCPU and 1 gigabyte. But I would like to go with something slightly a little bit bigger. I'm going to go with 2 gigabyte of memory. Let's see what we have here. I'm trying to say something easier. I'll go with this one, 2 CPU and 4 gigabyte of memory. Is a little bit bigger and can process the information quickly. Here we are going to put our key pair. I already have one key pair, but if you don't have a key pair, it's very easy. You can just click here and you can create one key pair. And of course, whenever you are creating a key pair, it's very important you make sure that your key pair is actually in the format that you want to use. So follow this one and you'll be able to create your own key pair. For my case, I'm going to click here. I already have a key pair. This key pair is in the format of .pem. There is .pkk, which actually you use if you are going to be using fully. But for this case, I'm using .pem because I'm going to be accessing this instance straight from the Visual Studio Code. This is very important. Most people, of course, always forget this part. And if you happen to forget this part, you're going to have some trouble being able to access your instance straight from the internet or straight from wherever platform you're going to be accessing your instance from. In this case, I'm going to edit because I want to make sure that I put the kind of network I have. In my case, I already have a network that is existing. Of course, if you don't have a network that is existing, you can always go ahead and create your own network. So I'm going to be using, this is my VPC, a virtual private cloud. This is the whole network for myself. Then, of course, there are different kind of subnet here. Subnet is a smaller network of the bigger network called VPC. I can go with a private subnet or I can use a public. The difference between the public and private subnet is that if we're going to put this server in the private subnet, we cannot be able to access it from the public internet. You have to remember that all the public subnet, they can allow you to have what we call IPv4 that is public. But when we talk about the private subnet is always going to start with an IPv4 that start with 10, especially if this is in the cloud. If you are talking about a virtualized environment, then we are going to be starting with something like 192. But in this case, it's going to be starting with 10. So anytime you see a subnet with 10.0.0. something, you know that is going to be private. And of course, you cannot access any instance that is inside of that kind of a subnet straight from the internet. So we are going to go with the public. This is another one that people always forget. People usually do not remember. Some people always forget this. They don't remember, of course, to enable the IPv4 IP, or what we call the public IP. So we have to enable this. And if you have done this, all of it, you don't need to worry about the protocol. We are going to come back and configure the security groups, because we are going to be dealing specifically with certain security group because of Jenkins. Now it's time to launch. So now there are many things you can do here, but of course I'm not going to be doing anything. I'm just going to go straight to the instance ID, and then I'll click on it. And here you can see that we do have the instance. The name of the instance is exactly what we gave the instance, which is Jenkins server. As you can see, it's still initializing. The state is pending. So I'm going to refresh this. So you keep refreshing, and when it turns green, you are good to go. But as it is refreshing, there are a few things we can do. So we are going to go to the GitHub. And this repository, of course, is going to be shared under the video. You can look for this repository under the video section. You're going to see it. And the name of this repository is Monitoring Jenkins, Prometheus, and Grafana. Yes, this solution is supposed to create a big solution for you to be able to monitor Jenkins. And you can monitor that using a very famous tool called Prometheus, which is the one that is going to be collecting the data that is really connected to the Jenkins server. And of course, we have the Grafana, which is mostly used to visualize the kind of data that is being collected by the Prometheus. But the reason I'm using it is because I do have a Jenkins that is going to be running as a container. So this is how our Jenkins is going to look like. There are two types of Jenkins. There is a container Jenkins, and of course, there is what we call the waterfall Jenkins. Why is it that I want to run my Jenkins as a container? There are a few advantages of running the Jenkins as a container. The first advantage is running Jenkins as a Docker container instead of waterfall has several advantages. The first advantage is portability. If you are going to be running Jenkins as a Docker container, it's going to become very highly portable. And you can be able to move it between different environments, such as development, testing, and production. Very important. And you do this because you can easily create this an image, or this simply an image of Jenkins. And all you need to do to be able to create similar environment is simply just going to Docker Hub and pulling this image into the kind of environment that you want. Isolation. Of course, we all know that when you are running a Docker container usually have some kind of isolation from the other systems that are actually running in the same server. And this is important because it provides an additional layer of isolation and security. And this is where we see that, of course, when you look at the container usually have its own file system network, etc. But the only thing that here we can say, even though we say that container has some kind of isolation, we always say that the isolation is not a total isolation, because this container is still running inside the server. Of course, it's running on top of the platform called Docker. But of course, you have to remember that all the containers that are running inside the server, they are sharing the operating system of the server. So even though we can say there is isolation, the isolation is not total. If you want a total isolation, then it's very good to think about virtualization. Let's look at scalability. Docker allows you to easily scale Jenkins horizontally. How? Because it's very easy. If you have, of course, a Jenkins image, you can just pull that Jenkins image into one server, then pull it into another server, and there you have two Jenkins running in two different servers, and you can share the traffic through a load balancer. It's as easy as that. This is why you can easily scale the Jenkins container horizontally. Easy to maintain. Easy to maintain. This is always easy because we all know that containers are going to be storing all the logs of the containers in one area. Of course, if you want to access the log, it's nothing but running the Docker command, and you'll be able to see all the information and what is happening inside the container. Flexibility. Of course, when you make this a Docker container, you have a lot of flexibility. You can run this provided you have Docker installed. You can run it in any operating system. You can run it in Windows. You can run it, of course, in Mac OS. You can do this also in Linux and all kind of distribution of Linux, provided you have Docker installed. Now, having said so, let's go back and see whether there is anything that is happening to our instance. And yes, as you can see, now it is green. I believe we are good to go. It has passed the checks. So now what you need to do here is very simple. You are going to come and click here. And of course, it's going to bring other information, as you can see below. We are more concerned about security. Why? Because we are going to be editing the security groups. All right. So what do I do? Nothing here to do, but you need to come to the security groups and click here. Good. Now we are at this point. Now what you need to do is to edit the inbound. Inbound is a traffic that is coming inside. Outbound is a traffic that is going out of the server. Now, as usual, all the servers on AWS, most of them are going to come with the default security group there. And the default one is the one for SSH. And the protocol, of course, we know is TCP, and the port is usually 22. And of course, as you can see here, is accepting the traffic. It's accepting all kinds of traffic. Now we come back to this repository. Again, I said this repository is available to you. You just need to look at it under the video. There is something I want you to see here. This is how you run a Docker container. If you don't remember how to do this, you need to go and revisit the videos on Docker. Now here we have two ports, port 8080 and port 50,000. I want you to pay attention to the first one. Let's start with port 8080. There is port 8080 and then we have colon 8080. So the question is, why do we have a colon and why do we have two ports that are repeating themselves and they are being separated by a colon? Nothing, but all you need to know is that one is external port, the other one is internal. Same case happened to the 50,000, but now the question is, what is 50,000? And nothing, this is just the port for the agent. You have to remember from the concept that we went through, you have to remember that Jenkins usually have an agent, and it's always advisable that you don't run any job on the Jenkins control, because Jenkins control has many other things to do. So the best thing is always to create an agent and allow the jobs to process through the agent. And that is, of course, is going to ease the work on the Jenkins control. And the Jenkins control can now focus on becoming more effective, efficient, and just to minimize the amount of work that the Jenkins control need to do and get some of that work to the agent. And that is actually the most recommended way to do this. Now we return back to AWS. So there are two ports we saw, 8080 and 50,000. So we are going to add them here. It's very simple. You just click that. You can see it's a custom TCP. Protocol, as you can see, is TCP 8080. And we're going to allow from everywhere. We add another one here again, but this is the one for agent. Again, the same case, and then we save the rules and we should be good to go. Click back on that and then we come back here and then we can see. So we have actually added the security, the ports to the security groups. Now the question is, how do I SSH into this instance? I want you to follow this carefully because it can be difficult if you don't know how to do it. The first thing is that I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code. Visual, here it is. So I'm going to open it. It's going to open, and when I open it, I see I don't have my PEM key. So my PEM key is Apollo.Florida or Apollo-Florida, whichever it was. I can't remember the name, but it needs to be here because if I don't have the PEM key here, I cannot be able to SSH into this server. So the first thing we are going to do is to go and check and look where this PEM key is. Immediately you create your PEM key, it's usually download in your server. So we're going to come here. This is a folder explorer. Let's see whether I can be able to find this PEM key here. What do I do? It's very simple. We're going to see whether we can find in the download. I hope so. My neighbor, I'm trying to search. I don't know whether I can search it here. Doesn't seem to be working fine. All right, so I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to minimize all these windows. And now I'm going to come to my desktop. I'm hoping that in my desktop, I should be able to find this. So what I'm going to do is something that you should practice a lot. So I have a folder here, and this folder is called Blue Ocean Jenkins. Don't worry about the name, just look at it as a folder. Now I'm going to right click on it. And when I right click on it, I'm going to go to show more options. Yours might not be like this, but this is how mine is. This is Windows 11. Now I'm going to open this with Git bash. And I can do ls. And of course, when I do ls, I can see the name of the folder. If I'm going to be able to see what is inside of this folder, I need to do cd. Then that's all. So if I do ls, now you can see that there are so many things here. So let's see. Apollo-Florida.pem is here. So good job. So all I need to do now is very simple. I need to move from this. This is nothing, but this is the Git bash. So it's another bash terminal. So what we are going to do is to move with it and go to Visual Studio Code. And how can I do that without necessarily having to struggle? It's very simple. You type the word code, you space, dot, and then you enter. You see what is happening when you enter? It opens straight up in the Visual Studio Code. Now I'm just going to increase the screen size, and I can come see Apollo here. And this is what we call a PEM key. This PEM key has been encrypted. Of course, it's just a password, and it's going to be what we need to be able to access the server. But for us to do that, we must be inside the folder where the PEM key is. Are we? Let's see. pwd Clinton working directory. Yes, this is a working directory. Can we do ls listen to see what we have under this folder? And you can see, yes, Apollo-Florida.pem is here. So we go to SSH. But before you SSH, there is something always we do so that we make this private key or this private PEM key to be private. So we always like to run chmod. Chmod is nothing. If you don't remember this, it's what we use to assign permission to the files, folders, etc. So we are going to do chmod 400. Again, you have to remember these. These are what we call the binary permissions. We are in binary permissions. When we are dealing with them, we are dealing, of course, with the owner, group, and others. In this case, we are only giving the owner the read permission because we have the read, write, and we have read. We always start, of course, with the read, and reading, of course, give you 4. Then, of course, we have what we call W, which is nothing, but it is writing and give you 2. And then we have what we call execution, which give you 1. So there is always a total of 7, 7, 7. And that is if you are dealing with everything. In this case, 4 belongs to the owner. The next 0 belongs, of course, to the group, and the last 0, of course, belongs to the others. So we are saying that only the owner should be able to read the content of this PEM key. And then, of course, we need to mention the name of the PEM key. You enter. If you enter and there is an error, you are not in the right folder where this PEM key is. Now, here you don't need to memorize anything. All you need to do is to come here, return back to AWS. And now again, I want you to come here, click on this server, and I want you to look for something simple, and that is connect. When you click on connect, I want you to come here and look. There are different ways you can do it. You can do EC2 instance connect, session manager, SSH, EC2. For our case, we are doing SSH. And now you have to be careful here to do this without having to struggle. You just need to take this example because it is a SSH. -I is used here to reference to the file. This is just a reference to the file that nothing but just our PEM key file. Now you take it, you come back to where your PEM key is, you kind of just paste and enter. And of course, it's going to ask for that, and then it's going to, now all of a sudden, we are inside this server. When you're inside the server, the first thing you should do before you do anything else is what we call patch management. You can do patch management manually, or you can do it automatically using a Python script, or you can use what we call the bash script. So I do both, but in this case, I don't have the script with me, so we are going to do this process manually. The first command is, of course, to update the system. How do I do that? We have to remember that the package manager, or the package management that manages, of course, the commands and all that, in Ubuntu, of course, is what we call apt. We are going to say get, update, and you run the system. Could not open the log, of course, and I know why. Because my permission are being denied because I'm who? Let's see, let's check. Who am I? I'm Ubuntu. What about if I run pwd? Home Ubuntu, that's the path. Print working directory. So what do I need to do? All I need to do is to say switch user, or I can do sudo switch user. And then when I do that, what happens is, now if you do pwd, you are going to see we are still at home Ubuntu, but if I say who am I, we are now the root. So we are no longer Ubuntu, now we are the root. So we have more privilege now. And if we have more privilege, now we can be able to run the commands like patch management, updating and upgrading the system. So let's do it. So it's apt get upgrade. If you don't know whether you need -y, just put it for the sake of it. So you enter, and of course it's telling us that we don't have no new update we need to worry about. So that is upgraded. Update, let's see. So you can see that updates do have some updates that need to be done. And you have to ask yourself, what are these updates? These updates are nothing, but these are the updates that are either suggested by the developers of this operating system. Some of them have to do with the security. This is why we always say that the patch management is vital. Having done so, now we move to the next stage. The aim of this video is nothing but to show you exactly how to start and launch a Jenkins server. Now we have to go back here, and we saw exactly the fact that we are creating our Jenkins server as a container. This is not a Warfare Jenkins where you go to the Jenkins website and you can get the command to run a Jenkins as server. No. This is a container, and we also saw the advantages of using the Jenkins as container. If you don't understand, again, this link or this repository is going to be somewhere at the bottom of the video, so you can always click on it, fork it, and make it yours, and you can always be able to go here and read about the benefits of using Jenkins as a container. Now we have to remember this. If we are going to succeed to run Jenkins as a container, there is something we must have installed, and that is the Docker itself. Because the Docker is what helps us to be able to run and manage containers and images in our server. So to be able to do that, I love Ubuntu because all I need is to put Docker. This is just the Docker itself. I put the name, and if I click enter, you are going to see that it's going to give me all the options on how I can be able to install Docker into this system. I'm going to go with this one, which is the first option that I'm given, and I'm going to put -y so that I don't have to do confirmation of yes or no. There we go. So it's now going to download Docker, and of course, so that we can be able, of course, to run the Docker container here. Give it time. So now we clear this. If I want to see whether Docker is installed, I don't need to be struggling doing the version. I can just run the binary. And you see, now Docker is here. It tells me how to start, stop, top, and pause, all those stuff. Yeah. Now, we need to check whether Docker daemon has been started. Now, somebody might be wondering, what is a Docker daemon? There are three things you need to understand when we are talking about Docker. We have the Docker socket, we have the Docker client, and we have the Docker daemon. Those three things you need to understand them. The Docker client is here. Anywhere I'm typing the command that usually is going to be starting with Docker, that is the Docker client. That's why I'm typing the commands, and that way when I type a command that is input, I get the output of that command. And now, what is Docker socket? The Docker socket is like the human ear, or it is between the Docker daemon and the Docker client. So when I type the command Docker, this information must be sent to the Docker daemon for processing. And the reason I'm able to get the response or the output is because somebody is listening and is sending this information to the Docker service, or what we call the Docker daemon. And the Docker daemon is processing that request, sending it back to the person that is sitting in between, and that person is now forwarding that information to me as an output. And that is none other than the Docker socket. So the work is just to make sure it's able to, of course, communicate the information that is being presented to the Docker client all the way to the Docker service for processing purposes. That's Docker socket. Docker daemon is nothing but it's going to be processing the request. So to check whether Docker daemon is active, we are going to run the very famous command called systemctl status Docker. It's active. And now you can see Docker socket here, because if Docker daemon is active, Docker socket is active because they work together. So now we Control Z, we clear this, and we are happy to go. Now, all we need to do now is to come here, and we are going to copy this command as it is, and I'm going to explain when I paste it so that there is no confusion. There. So for you to run a container, you have to run the command docker run. Then we have this is a /. Is this backward or forward? I think yeah, this is a backward /. Yes. So this backward / is nothing but it's just to tell the system that this is just a continuation. So we have all of them here, all of them, just to say that this is just a continuation. You have to run this as a root. We have --rm, which means In case there is any update, grading, there is any reboot, this container is going to disappear. Run it in detached mode means run it silent. Don't enter into it. Of course, we have two ports that we are mapping 8080. Of course, the 50,000. The name you can change, but in this case, the name is nothing but Jenkins. Now, I want you to pay a lot of attention now here because this is key. We are mounting the Docker socket on the home or on the system or where it is installed, and we are mounting that to the container. If you don't do that, Jenkins will not be able to communicate with the Docker daemon. Again, we are mounting the binary of Docker location, and we are mounting that again to the inside the container. Again, why is this important? So that Jenkins can be able to get access to the Docker and build and manage images and containers. Finally, we are mounting a volume. And in this case, we are mounting the volume inside the container. Why is this important? We are mounting the volume to make sure that we are able to persist the data. If this container disappears in case of anything, all we need is to paste it and we are back to where we were before the container exited. We have to be careful with the last one, which is Jenkins. The name of this image, I got it exactly from Docker Hub. So if you go to Docker Hub, and I'm going to take you there very quickly. You come here, Docker Hub. If I do Docker Hub, it's fine. You come here, you open this. And now you don't even need to log in. Just need to say Jenkins, and you are going to see it here. How many people have put Jenkins? 1 billion plus. So it's very famous. So we come back here. And now I have explained this enough. So what do I need to do? Enter. This image was not existing inside my system. So the first thing that is going to happen is that this image is going to be pulled into my system. You can see the pulling happening. Then all of a sudden, it's going to be downloaded, and all of a sudden, we have everything that we need. Now, how do I check whether a container is running? It's nothing but Docker PS should give you that, and you can see now we have our Jenkins container running. How do I check the container that are running and the one that have exited? Nothing, we just add -a. And again, we know that this Jenkins container is up and running. Well, how can we access the Jenkins console? It's nothing but it's very simple. All we need to do is to go and get the IPv4 for this server, and then you go and paste it on the browser. Let's do that. So you're going to come here, come back to AWS, look for the EC2. EC2, we should be looking for EC2. And now, if I highlight it, I should be able to see this. This is the IPv4. And now, if I come here and I put it like that, I'm not going to see anything because, when I put it like this, is usually we are looking at port 80 or port 8080. At this point, I don't have anything. In fact, what I should have done here is just to come and add column and put 8080. And as you can see, our Jenkins is up. But we have more trouble. We have more trouble. And what is the trouble? The trouble is that we need to go and get the initial administrator's password. How do I do that? Well, let's assume you have never seen a Jenkins container. So you are going to come here and say, well, I just need to do cut. Nothing. And this is now where we are going to apply the principle of course, or we are going to apply the knowledge of dealing with containers. If I want to see the logs that are inside the container, I need to be aware of the command that I need to run. So we're going to start with Docker PS, of course. It's important so that we can have we can be able to see the details of the container that is up and running. Now, after this, we need to do something we call Docker log -f, and all we need is the container ID. You come and paste it here and good to go. Now, these are the logs. This is what's happening inside the container. This is what is happening. Now, how do I get the password? Here we go. It's very straightforward. It's here. Now you go back, of course, to the console, paste it, continue, and you shouldn't have any trouble. Here is where I want us to listen carefully, because I want you to see that whatever is happening on the console, because this is what we call the Jenkins console, is also going to be happening inside the Jenkins, of course, inside the Jenkins container. And those logs, you are going to be able to see them. Let's first of all go back and see how the Jenkins container looks like. This is how the Jenkins container looks like. So if we are going to start installing the plugins, the suggested one, what is likely to happen? That's a good question. So let's see, let's discover this together. So you are going to say install suggested plugin. You can see now the plugin are installing. Let's go and see what is happening inside the Docker, container, or the place where the logs are stored. As you can see, whatever is happening in the console is also happening here. So you can see that the installation is happening, but is also happening here, and we can see all the logs. If I want to know which one was successful, I can know. You see, anything that is successful is being registered here as success. Successful. So we wait for it to finish. And now you are going to see exactly how many plugins that are going to be installed and how many we are going to have. And that's good. So we give it time. Yes, it's done. You can see that in 44 seconds, we had 82 plugins installed. So that's a good one. Let's go back here and see what is happening. Yes, we are done. You need to put a username. You don't need to put anything complex. Nothing complex. Easy. Nothing complex. You can put any IP address, email address, doesn't matter. And now we are going to save it. This is a URL for Jenkins, and we save that and we start using Jenkins. And now here we are. This is Jenkins by itself. Now we are done with that, and that is exactly how you launch a Jenkins as a container. And of course, in this case, we are using Ubuntu server from AWS. Thank you.